morning.
Good morning.
Ooh, I think we're a little wonky. Do we look? I guess we look all right.
We look fantastic. The world is wonky.
The world is wonky. Welcome to Daily Dose. We are talking today about the new normal, which I think is a phrase overused second only to unprecedented times. But I think that there is, I think there's some real value to thinking through this. And I want to give you an example that we are using as the inspiration for today's conversation. So yesterday, a donor called me. Let me back up just a bit. In my day job, in the spring, we have an invitation-only private event, which is a fundraiser for our individual grant program, individual artist grants program. And last year we canceled it, and this year we decided to do a virtual event because we knew that we had the potential to start losing our donors if we didn't keep engaging them. So the virtual event is coming up kind of the middle of April. And I had a donor call me yesterday and say, Dana, you gotta provide an in-person option. And I said, well, you know, I'm not sure that that's true. And she gave me some compelling reasons for why we have to start moving back towards a hybrid something. Obviously, we're not gonna have 50 people in a room. And my board hasn't approved this yet, and so I'm not saying this is a done deal. I'm saying that this conversation got me thinking because I have sort of developed a bit of a adverse reaction to going back to our old normal. Because my old normal was work at the office all day, often go to arts events 2 to 4 nights a week, and then perhaps have something, one or two events on the weekend. I don't want to go back to that. I really don't. We don't need to stay in the pretty intense lockdown that we were in, although I did sort of love that. But I want my new normal to have a much, much better, more realistic, more manageable balance. So I am reluctant to even entertain this idea because I'm afraid to start opening the door, because if I open the door, I feel like the onslaught of the old normal will push its way through and I will have lost all of what I've gained in this year. So that's the premise to the story, to the inspiration for today. So what made me think then is, well, that's really how you felt coming out of a 2-week hospital stay and a 4.5-week stint in rehab. I'm not gonna ever say that was easy, but you didn't have any access to any triggers or alcohol.
That's true.
So, you know, if someone says you can't have sugar, but your sugar bowl is still in your cabinet, that's harder to ignore than you can't have sugar and we've removed all the sugar from the house and you can't go shop for it. I mean, when you don't have what tempts you in front of you, it's not easier, but it's harder to get it. So Dr. Mary, how can you sort of relate this, and can you talk about some of your early concerns coming out of rehab and wanting to stay in a new normal, recognizing that the world had to go back to, you know, you weren't going to stay in rehab for the rest of your life. You were going to come back to your life, but you didn't want to fall back into your old normal, which was so damaging.
It's weird. I think I have to backtrack here. There were a couple of defining moments, and we've talked about them, and we've talked about. We just talked about one of them. I think just last week, I think, or even Monday. It's been a strange week. For me, it strangely wasn't that difficult because when Joanne asked me to come to her office, Joanne was my counsellor. She said, well, we've decided, we had our meeting, you're ready to go home if you want, you can go home tonight. but you know, you got to come back. I want you to be here
for daycare.
For daycare.
Yeah.
8:45 to 3:30. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. And she goes, what should we do? And I swear, I mentioned this, we started all this off and we wrote our side of the story, and I still think this was a test. So I looked at her right in the eye and said, should we phone Dana? So we did, and Dana delightfully said, oh my God, absolutely, bring him home, I'll come get him. Oh, yeah.
I didn't say it at all like that,
But you know
because
what I
I'm not an Irish grandma, but yeah.
Jesus, that's grand. That's what she said. And I just thought to myself, that's a defining moment. My wife would like me to come home. That night we had that whole story I talked about when Dana said, I can't, it's so unfair, I can't drink alcohol again. And I just thought, no, I've faked it so long. Let's go. And that was a defining moment for me. I went to the nearest, where technically...
We went to Luna.
It technically has a bar. They serve alcohol there, and I just sat down there and goes, right, here we go, sink or swim. So...
We swam, just in case anyone's concerned.
And I've been swimming ever since. And it's lovely.
Which is good for someone who can't swim.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But, so that was my new normal right there. I know, unfortunately, dozens of people who couldn't have done that. We have small amounts of alcohol in this house. We get the odd bottle of wine every now and then. We store stuff left over from an event Dana has, and it can safely sit in the laundry room just round there. There's a few cans
Our
of William
high
Beale.
security, temperature controlled.
I don't even, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't longingly stare at them or anything. So I'm probably not a good example for this, but I've talked to people that say, you know, if I even look at a bottle of whiskey or something, it's game over. I have to drink. I'm like a kid in a candy store. And thankfully, that's not my story, but it is so many other people. So when people say, I just want to get back to a new normal, I just think you have... I mean, part of me says, you've got no idea, but then I'm also delighted for them that they don't. Because they just think, you know, the new normal, if you don't appreciate what your new normal is anyway, you're always going to think, well, why did it change in the first place? There had to be a lockdown to keep people safe, and people kept dying. And then, even this morning, because of yesterday's state legislation, the mask mandate in North Dakota has been relaxed, and now it's voluntary, which, you know, because, yes, cases have gone down. But cases have gone down because, I don't know, it might have something to do with the fact that most people are wearing a mask. It might.
Isn't he kind?
So, you know, going back to normal or what is new normal, it's from an addict's point of view, it's not a clear-cut question or answer.
So talk about when we flew to England. So Maz came home in March. We were supposed to go to England and Ireland in March. That trip had to obviously be canceled because Maz was in the hospital and rehab. But we rescheduled it for September of that year. It was the first time we'd been back in almost 13 years. So talk about how you felt going into that trip, because I think this really speaks to this idea.
Yeah, it wasn't the first trip we took on a plane, because we went to Hawaii before we went to England. But it was a big international trip, and I used to take them as, I'm on a plane, they'll give you a free glass of wine, you can buy others, so I usually just drank enough to fall asleep, and on our trip to Hawaii, I thought, well, no, this is great, but to me, that wasn't an international trip. But going back to England, I thought, well, I always used to drink on these things. What the hell am I going to do? And I said it to Dana, going, I've got no idea what's going to happen. Well, none of my old friends in England knew what had happened to me. So I thought, well, no, I've got to deal with that. How weird am I going to act? And
the pub culture in England is as strong as it is in Ireland, so there was that concern as well.
And my mum lives at the top of a little quaint high street that's probably about 100 yards long, but has 11 pubs in it.
All of them delightful.
And a liquor store, and the supermarkets in England can sell liquor, and there's 2 of them down that little high street as well. So, alcohol was everywhere.
And was a historical part of your time in England.
And so my new normal then was well, I can't drink. And I was happy about that, but this was the first time it was going to be worse than just going across the street to Luna. But my new normal was I can't drink, and the plane ride was spectacular. Before we both invariably just thought, jet lag, let's get some sleep. We had quite nice conversations, I seem to remember. We watched films together. I think we were watching different films because Dana was obviously watching a comedy.
Oh yeah, I watched Stepdad.
The woman next to Dana actually asked her what she was watching. It's just
oh my gosh, that movie's incredibly funny.
But it was, but that's my new normal now, and it's wonderful. But there's a world of difference between being happily embracing something.
Well, and I think here's what I think is important. Whether you're talking about addiction or you're talking about going back to a very, very busy, demanding job schedule, or fill in your blank. I think what's important here is to recognize it, to have these kinds of conversations, either with yourself or with your work team or your spouse or whoever it is who is on this journey with you. It's really important to stop and say, okay, here's what our lives used to look like. I mean, I'll just give you this quick example. The first time we went to England, and this was early in our relationship, a year and a half in.
Yeah, Quinn was 6.
Quinn was little. The first time we went, I'd never been to Europe. Maz said to me before we got on the plane, order a white wine because I want to have it. And I said, what? Because I didn't realize that alcohol was, at that point, it was free.
Yeah, my God, I forgot about
And
this.
he said, order a white wine because I want to have yours and mine. And so every time the cart came by, he didn't even ask me if I wanted it. Now, I drank literally almost nothing at that point, so I didn't want it. I wouldn't have ordered it. But the conversation we had before we got on the plane was, I'll take your wine and mine too.
That's true.
So our normal was that Maz drank twice the amount on the flight. Because I don't like to drink while I'm flying. It makes me feel yucky. So we both had to sort of go back and reflect on what our normal had been, think through what our new normal was, because our new normal was that I could drink some,
Yeah.
it didn't bother you, and you didn't drink at all.
Yeah.
And then we had to stop and say, all right, now we're going back to a different normal. How are we going to navigate that? Because an international flight and 2 weeks in England is not living in our house.
Yeah.
We knew what to do with this normal. We had to decide what to do with the next new normal. And that is true for all of us.
Yeah.
So I came across a meme today that I actually think is really apt to this. Don't be afraid to start over. This time, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience.
Yeah.
What's been your experience? What is your current experience? And how can you take what's currently working, apply it to the next new experience? You don't have to go backwards. You can continue to go forwards.
Actually, that kind of sums up most of those C's we've been talking about on Mondays.
Absolutely. So, spend some time reflecting on what do you want this next normal to look like, whether that's got addiction as part of it or any other facet of your life. You can intentionally set a lot of that. So do that. Be intentional with what's going to happen to your next normal.
Don't, things change, but they don't change as much as you sit there and panic. I've heard loads of people saying, we can never go back to this. This will never happen again. I think, well, this isn't the first pandemic we've had. We've had many of them.
Yeah.
The one people like to talk about is the one in 1918 to 1920. And
we all went back
yeah,
to whatever our normal was
Yeah, and it continued to expand into modern times. You know, most of the Big Ten universities in this country didn't have 70,000 seater stadiums during the last pandemic, and they built them after them.
Yes.
People are going to go back to sport when it's safe and healthy to do so.
And the arts, FYI.
Yeah, and the arts.
Okay. Time to go.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Have a fantastic day. See
See
you
you
tomorrow.
tomorrow with, we have a really special guest. I'm just going to give you a clue. She's related to me. And Mother, in case you think it's you, it's not you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.